Hi, Beth Rebenstorf with the Reby Homes team, and today's topic, bidding wars and multiple offer situations. How to make your offer stand out in today's multiple offer market. Well, when the real estate market is clearly a seller's market, it can be frustrating to be a buyer. Heck, it can be a war zone. When demand is high and supply is low, it becomes standard practice for sellers to weigh multiple offers that lead to bidding wars. Now, that doesn't mean throw in the towel. It just means avoid surrendering to what we call buyer fatigue, which is when after 4 or 5 rejected offers, buyers are exhausted, frustrated, and they're tempted to quit. And the very best way to avoid buyer fatigue is to be informed, to be prepared, and to be very shrewd. So here are 5 tips to win in a multiple offer market. Tip number 1 is to do everything you can to avoid the multiple offer situation. Now, I know what you're thinking. How? Day 1 on the market and there are already offers. Well, just hear me out. It may or may not be possible. If it's not possible, then you want to be the first or second offer. Either way, the key is to react quickly on the very first day. And it's critical that you have a skilled guide that you can trust that has prepared you for all the options before you find your dream home. If you want to get educated and think through all your options after you've already found your dream home, then you've lost your edge and you've lost the ability to stand out against the other 5 or 7 or 10 offers. Tip number 2, a big mistake when multiple offers are the norm is a messy, unclear offer with lots of contingencies. So the easier you make it on the seller to say yes, the better your chances are. If you need to sell your current home before you can purchase a new one, well, that contingency is risky for the seller. If the seller has another offer that is not contingent, then your offer typically goes below any cash or non-contingent offers. The workaround for that, while you may not want to hear it, is to sell your home first so that your offer is not contingent, or at the very least, be sure that your home is already under contract and just waiting to close. Now, that may mean carrying 2 mortgages before yours sells, if that's an option for you. Renting for a couple months after your house sells as you negotiate on your new home, or negotiating a lease back from the buyer of your home, which avoids a double move, but more importantly, may be the reason that the seller chooses your offer. Tip number 3, consider reducing the inspection period. Now, in Arizona, the typical inspection period is about 10 days, and reducing the inspection period from the standard 10 days to say 7 or 5 days is something that sellers respond to very favorably. Now, it's important to the seller because when you combine the standard 10-day inspection period with 5 days that the seller has to respond, then another 5 days for the buyer to respond to the seller's response, well, that's 20 days into a 30 or 45-day escrow. So the seller's concern is that the buyer will cancel 10 or 15 days prior to the close date. And chances are they've already made arrangements to move, so shortening that time frame is a positive for the seller. Tip number 4, now buckle up for this one. It takes a little bit to explain, but it's the one that most often causes buyers to lose in a multiple offer situation. Now, cash buyers don't need an appraisal like finance buyers do. And that doesn't mean that cash buyers don't do an appraisal. It means that they can't cancel the contract and reserve their earnest deposit back if the property does not appraise. Typically, the appraisal is ordered only after the inspection contingency is removed. And as we learned in tip number 3, that's usually 20 days after contract acceptance or 10 or 15 days before closing. So the appraisal can take another 10 days to be completed. And this is something that if the seller can avoid it, they will. Then there's the risk of a low appraisal. If the appraisal value is lower than the contract price, the buyer has to pay the difference, as lenders will only lend based on the appraised value, not the contract price. So when a seller compares a high cash offer to a high financed offer, the seller's concerned that a low appraisal, well, it may cause the buyer to cancel the contract. And that's a huge driver for sellers choosing a cash offer over a financed one. Now, it's important to know that whether it's a cash offer or an offer that has waived the appraisal contingency, well, the buyer can still have an appraisal done. And if it's completed within that 10-day inspection period, or whatever the inspection period is, the buyer can still cancel for cause and receive their earnest deposit back. So removing the appraisal contingency, it puts your financed offer on par with cash offers. And tip number 5, if you choose not to waive the appraisal, you can agree up front to cover any gap between the purchase price and the appraisal price. Loans are based on the appraised value, not the purchase price. So any gap between the two will increase the overall cash needed to close. But showing the seller that you have the cash to cover the gap, well, it helps position you closer to a cash buyer. And this is where choosing a trusted advisor and a skilled negotiator is critical, especially in multiple offer situations. The goal is to win the deal and protect buyer interests. To lead, guide, and protect buyers means clearly understanding the risks, skillfully structuring and negotiating the offer, and navigating all the integrated complexities. As always, we're on your side, the Rebie Homes team.